Hey everybody, this is Robert with RC Archery, and this video is going to show you 5 tips on how I set up my bows. Everybody, thanks for tuning in again. I'm back in my garage for this video. I haven't done one inside my garage in a while, but it's been triple digit heat with high humidity, and I just haven't bothered to make it outside the last few days. I'm trying to stay away from that. So this is a night video for me, filming inside my garage, a little bit cooler. So bear with me. Not quite as pretty as scenery, maybe not quite as interesting as a video with me shooting and stuff, but I'm gonna give you some good information. So 5 tips. Tip number 1, I always set my bow up to aim over a certain tune. So I've talked about this and hit on this in some of my last couple weeks videos, but really what I'm doing is I know how I want my bow to hold and aim on target. To me, that's more important. So versus chasing a spec sheet or versus changing mythical bear shaft tune or something like that, I'm gonna set my bows up to where I can hold dead center on target, and that's what matters the most, and then I'll tune around that. So for me, what does that mean? Well, one, cams. When I talked about this last week, depending on the type of cam system, depending on which ones I'm using, I may have the top cam hit first, I may have them hit together. So however that is, but basically what I'm doing with that is I'm finding what aims best for me on target. Is it aiming better for me to not have as much resistance and having to pull through from that top cam hitting the cable and then the bottom cam hitting? Is it holding better for me to have that more resistance on there? It just depends on what's going on and what looks better on target. Again, with the spiral cam, if I have the top cam hitting ahead of the bottom one and I'm having to really pull through that really upsets my aiming and it causes me to have some problems. Maybe the exact opposite on some of the hunting cams and different things like that, but finding what works best for you per cam is what's going to help you aim over that tune. So the second thing that I'm always going to look at is my loop height. And I go over this really, more in depth on my newest instructional DVD video that's on Vimeo right now, my advanced tuning method. So I'm just going to touch on it here, but I look for a loop height to keep me engaged. You're changing leverage points on the bow whenever you're moving the loop up or down. You're pulling more from the top of the bow or less from the top of the bow. I want that loop to be set up on a height that's going to create me to have to lift the bow up with my arm, not a lot, but a little bit, because I want the muscles here on my side engaged, because I want to be able to hold that bow up. That keeps you from dropping out of the bottom of the target more, and it also keeps you from having, vertical spread on your target, vertical float. The other thing that I look at is not so much draw weight, but holding weight, and that's a big factor that a lot of people, leave out. I know how I have my shot. I have a dynamic shot and I have a pull-through type shot. So what that means for me is my holding weight on my bow that I'm most comfortable with is a little bit lower than what it's going to be whenever I execute my shot. Some people are the exact opposite. Some people don't pull through their shot very much or at all, and they want that higher holding weight when they're at anchor, and that's what's going to help you. So playing around with that, knowing what type of shot works best for you, that's a good thing to look at. Me personally, I have my bow set up. I have pretty much all my bows that I'm using right now set up right around 17 pounds at holding, so it gives me a little bit less weight and poundage there to settle into my shot and really kind of get comfortable with things. And then I pull from there, and I probably pull into the low to mid 20s. If I had to guess, I pull pretty well. So if I had to guess, that's probably where it is. Based off some of my old stuff, I've had some spiral cams set up at 20, 21, 22 pounds, and I know kind of how that feels versus the way that I pull through my shot right now with the way that I'm setting my cams up. So somewhere in that area, but I know how I have it, and I know where I'm the steadiest on the weight, but I know how I need to get there. So always look at that as well. The other thing that I'm going to talk about is stabilizers. So again, I set my stabilizers up the same way I do my loop. I want it to be weighted towards the front. I want that bow, whenever I hold it in my bow hand, just alone, when I let go of it, I want it to lean forward some. I don't have it be a real bad lean. I don't have it lean back, but for me that works best, because again, that gives me a little bit of direction when I'm having to hold the bow up and I'm having to be dynamic and I'm pulling through my shot. So if I'm heavier out on the front as I pull through, it's not going to cause me any up and down or any bobs. If I'm lighter on the front, say if I had this bow balanced perfectly at brace, that front end would be too light for me. When I went to pull through my shot, I'd pull the dot straight over the top of the center. So knowing how you have that set up, knowing your shot type, that's what I look at, and then I tune secondary from that. Now I'll still get a good tune, but my aiming and my holding on target is always primary. Tip number 2, use your stock strings to your advantage. So you see I still have my stock strings. I shoot my bow with them when I get them new, when they're on there. Basically what I do with them though is I use them as my guinea pigs. I want to see how I need to set my bow up, take twist out of them, out of cables, out of strings, put twist into cables and strings, who knows. Whatever I'm doing with it, that's what I use these for. When you're twisting and especially untwisting, it does a lot of stress and strain on the servings. It starts to loosen them off. Maybe you're doing half twist, who knows what's going on. But it starts to wear them out. So I don't want to buy a nice new set of custom strings and then start playing guinea pig with them and seeing what's going on, because then I'm going to create problems. It's going to have them wear out sooner. Especially like with my hyper edge that I did, where I did number 2 cam and then long strung the bow. So a situation like that, you may even run into custom links that you need, but you want to make sure that you use these and have everything completely set on the bow the way that you're going to shoot it, the way that you're going to use it before you order custom strings, and then keep them. Because if anything happens, and there's a catastrophe with my bow and a string gets cut or something crazy happens, I keep these with me so that I can switch them out if I need to. They should already be at the right length or very, very close to it, so I can still have a good shooting bow until I get some new set. And then it's getting a good set of custom strings. There's more in it than just picking pretty colors and putting something on the bow that looks good. You need a good set that's made well. No secret, I use Twisted X bow strings. That's my personal builder that I choose is Shane there. He's the owner, he builds all the strings himself. But just finding somebody that has a good process that's going to make you a good, custom set. And I've done videos in the past that go over, what I look for when I buy them, and I'll link and put that in the description below for you to be able to watch. But that's definitely my second tip and a big important factor on when you're setting your bows up. All right, so tip number 3 is bow fitment, and this goes along with the last tip that I talked about on the strings. So using these stock strings that were on the bow to be able to find the perfect fit for your bow, for your body, where your form and everything is in place and everything is working. So there's a few key places that I like to look at whenever I go over bow fit, and the major one is your shoulder. You want to have good shoulder positioning. The second one is your head. You want a good vertical head position as well, where you're not having to lean down at the string, you're not leaning back. All that needs to be, bow fitment as far as string, cable lengths, everything like that. All that is all put in together with that, and we need to figure it out. The second, aspect of that is the loop length. And the way that I do that is I look at, how I'm holding, how I'm doing with my release arm. Your release arm and your loop is basically your leverage point. The loop being the fulcrum, your arm being the lever. Shorter loop is going to kick the elbow up. It's going to give you more leverage over the bow. Longer loop, it brings the elbow down. And depending on the type of shot you have and depending on the way that you're doing things, you need to adjust that to where you have the right leverage points. I'm going to do a whole video just on this later on, so I won't go too big in depth on this because I'm going to take a lot of time to explain it there. It's pretty in depth on what it's going to control, but I do want to hit just the covered topics on there. I'm going to draw my bow back and let you look at everything. Front shoulder needs to be down and needs to be forward. It doesn't need to be hyper extended, but it does need to be down and forward versus humped up and pushed back. You don't want all the muscles here pushed up into your neck. That's going to be bad. It's also going to cause you to have a waverance on the way it goes. There's too much muscle involved there. There's too much of that joint movement involved there. It's going to cause you to have too much of a spread on how you're doing your bow arm forwards and backwards. What that's going to do is cause the string to anchor different on your face, forward more or back more, and that's going to make you change your head. So you're going to be ducking down, you may be leaning back. And then the last part of that is it changes your anchor point. So it makes that hand go more forward or more back on your face. The last thing you want to do is take all the time to make all that perfect and then have a problem in your system somewhere. So having a consistent bow shoulder to where it's out, where it's down, it won't move that way. It's going to be way better for you on target. Second part, like I said, having a straight up and down head. You want that head to be vertical so you're not worrying about going up and down as well. And then having that good release fitment on your face for your anchor point. So you can see head vertical, shoulder out, shoulder down, all that's very important for you. All right guys, so tip number 4 is taking out our human error. So we're not robots, we make mistakes, right? So what we need to do is be able to set up our bows to minimize those impacts downrange on target. This is pretty much just a summary of everything that I went over in my advanced tuning methods instructional video. So I'm going to keep this brief because the majority of that information is going to be in that. But I will go over what I do. The biggest factor is going to be in your grip. So we need to be able to take out our torque left and right on target with our grip and also up and down. The sight is going to be step 1. Most hunting sights, the top end ones rather, are going to come with an adjustment on here to where you can adjust it forward and back. Pretty much any target sight you look at is going to have that in there built in as well. Having that distance away from the riser is going to, finding that butter zone there is going to minimize that torque impact left and right on target when we're not 100% perfect on our grip. The other aspect of that is the arrow rest. So moving it forward and back, same situation. It's finding where that torque is minimizing on target. And then the last part of that is, especially if you have a blade rest, the angle of this and the oscillation of the blade versus your arrow. So the arrow flexes, it oscillates as it goes across the blade, and then the blade's going to be doing the same. So you need those to match up. Now, a lot of that basically is finding the thickness of the blade. Once you find the correct thickness, it's micro tuning that to where it matches up. So it's changing the angle of the blade, steeper or shallower to have that weight effect on it to where it matches that arrow. And those are all going to help you when it comes down to torque. Now the other aspect of that is getting a fletched arrow and powder testing it. That's something that I do with any bow that I do, whether it's a blade, drop away, whatever. And a lot of people don't do that. I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't run a blade, I run a drop away, so I don't need to do that. And then they start chasing left and right tears that never go away, or they chase a high tear that never goes away. Powder test your arrows. Buy some spray foot powder off-brand from Walmart. It's cheap. It's a really good investment. Spray the back of the arrow, shoot it through the bow, see what happens. A lot of times what I'll do with that on a blade is I'll use it for my knock indexing to where it's just micro tuning the adjustment of the knock to where that arrow has the least amount of contact on the blade. Or the vanes rather have the least amount of contact. You may not always be able to get all the contact out, especially if you're using a really small micro diameter arrow, but you want to have the least obtrusive contact. You don't want it to just be kicking off the side of a vane all of a sudden. You want it to be able to glide across them if you're going to have it, or if not, have it going down the center. But that's the way you would find it, and that's really going to help you. The torque tuning and the powder tuning is going to do more for your groups than any bear shaft tuning ever would, and it's something that so many people overlook. I talk to people all the time and they chase their tails on their tuning, but if you'll do those methods, it's going to help you with your downrange accuracy a whole lot. All right guys, we're down to tip number 5, or well, 5, I'm not doing 10, it's way too hot for that. Tried to beat the heat and I'm still sweating, so. Tip number 5 is going to be actually just tuning the bow. So you may notice that I left this last because there's a lot that I feel that goes into it before I ever tune the bow. And really my tuning process is going to probably be a lot different from what you've heard of, especially if you're among the archery talk crowd. My tuning process is going to be find what group's best on target, not chase a mythical perfect bear shaft. I have a big belief, and a little bit of direction on the arrow is going to be the most forgiving. I've done lots and lots of testing on that with my bows, and a small direction of that arrow coming out of the bow has always been more forgiving and always gave me tighter groups down target regardless of the range that I'm at. So with that said, my tuning process, just a quick rundown of it, I do a paper tune, just a standard paper tune. I stand anywhere from 2 to 5 yards away, and I'll use a bear shaft and a fletch shaft. And normally what I'll do is I'll shoot a bear shaft through paper and try to get it to bullet hole, and then I'll shoot a fletch shaft through paper the same way, make sure it's shooting a bullet hole. Reason I do both is because if something crazy is going on with the arrow rest or something weird's happening, I want to know. That paper test is going to tell me. So let's say if I'm getting too weird of a kick or too bad of a misdirection off a vane or something going on with the arrow, when I shoot that fletched arrow, it's going to tell me. So do I go crazy over a bear shaft that's going to paper tune a perfect bullet hole? No. I've had bows that just won't. My Hyper Edge is a perfectly good example. My Hyper Edge has a high tear. It's no lie, no cover up or anything. A lot of people have that problem with that number 2 cam, but does it shoot bad for me that way? Absolutely not. I shot a bare shaft through it and I got it left and right as good as I could. I got the height as good as I could. Played around with a lot of different settings. I ended up 90 degrees just like I always do. Doesn't have the prettiest of tears, but it works. I can shoot a fletch shaft through there and it's almost a perfect bullet hole because it's correcting itself. So it's fine. To me, that'll work. It's good enough when I go on to my next step. My next step is going to be what I do is a French tune. You may want to walk back tune. It's up to you. I take out the middle distance. I shoot at 20 yards. All this is with fletch shafts. I shoot at 20 yards, use a Vegas face. I get everything hitting in the middle of the X-ring, and then I go back to 40, and then I shoot again. So I'll shoot a 3-shot group at 40 with my 20-yard pin, aiming at the top spot of my Vegas face, just because it's going to hit the bottom of my target or midway through, depending on which one I'm using. But that tells me what to do. From that point, I move my arrow rest, and it's a back and forth until I get everything squared away, and I'll have everything in a line. Basically, just straight down the target. From that point, I'm going to shoot one bare shaft at 30 yards with a group of fletched arrows. All I'm looking for with this is the height of the bare shaft. I don't care if it hits a foot off to the left or a foot off to the right. It doesn't, because my grip is good and I know what I'm doing with pressures on it. But I don't care if it hits dead in the middle. In fact, I'd prefer it not to, really. But what I do is look for height. Sometimes I do this at 20, it just depends on what I'm doing, but I want it to hit below my fletched arrows, left or right usually, but below it for sure. And after that, I group tune. I'll go to 30 yards, sometimes it's 20 yards if my indoor arrows, I'll go to 50 yards, whatever it may be, whatever I have to work with, but I'll shoot my groups of arrows and I'll do a little bit of adjustment to my arrow rest just to see what's gonna happen. Usually what I'll do first is do height adjustments, lower the rest down in small movements, raise it up in small movements, and see what happens to my groups. And I'm looking for the smallest vertical spread to where everything kind of will spread out like a pancake. At 30 yards, when I get this perfect, I can have all my arrows hit basically on the same horizontal line, left and right. 50 yards, I'm within an inch or so, maybe less, just depending on how good I'm shooting that day. After that, I do the same thing, but I do left and right movements on the arrow rest, and basically I'm doing the same thing. I'm finding where it has the smallest horizontal spread, where I can shrink those groups down. Once I get done with that, I actually go back to 20 yards or I go back to 30 yards, shoot a group of fletched arrows, and I shoot one bare shaft, just see where it hits. I'm not gonna say, hey, my bare shaft hits off to the left or it hits off to the right. I need to go back and adjust stuff because I've already got my bow shooting as good as it's gonna shoot. I'm just using it as a reference. I know where that bare shaft hit. If something gets changed, if something moves, I know I need to tune it to get it back to that point. But that's all I do with it. I don't do anything crazy where I'm chasing a mythical bare shaft, bullet hole, Robin Hood your arrow at 20 yards, anything like that. I just don't do that because I haven't found as good of shooting with my own setups that way. But that's the long and short of it. It's 5 major tips and a whole bunch of little ones under each category. Appreciate you tuning in today. I look forward to coming out with some more of these. Hopefully it'll cool down and get back outside and have some cooler looking videos, a little bit more shooting for you. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you soon.